Hey, everybody. Welcome to What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Amy.
And this is Margaret. And today we're talking about being a tradition keeper in your household.
Mm-hmm.
I am really excited to discuss this topic. It is, but before we do that, Amy, let's keep up a tradition of our own. Reading the mailbag. Forgetting to read the mailbag and then reading the mailbag is really our tradition.
That is how we do it. Oh, wait, there's a mailbag.
Oh, wait, there's a mailbag. But this is one we don't want to miss. From Michelle on Facebook, I'm listening to yesterday's episode, and I would just like to say how much I appreciate Amy and Margaret being so real and awesome. I've been listening to the podcast for about 4 years now, and I guarantee that I am a better, saner, happier parent because of you guys. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Michelle, I really appreciate that. And it is so true that I am a better, saner, happier parent because of this podcast. I understand things so much better than I did 800 episodes ago. It's all it took.
And I'm going to lay in a little shout out. Thank you so much to Michelle that because of a lot of boring things that are happening in podcasting with the way podcasts are downloaded and other boring things, we would really love you if you are enjoying the podcast to take time out of your day, post about it on your social media, tell a friend about it, give it a rating or review. We're in a little bit of a regrowth period of the podcast.
And so is podcasting, by the way.
Yes.
Like, this
I
is
mean, it's not our fault.
Specific.
Of course,
right.
We're amazing. But podcasting is always changing. And right now, it's been a little challenging. So anything you can do to help out and tell a friend about What Fresh Hell would be extremely appreciated, even more than ever.
This,
Amy,
yeah.
Let's talk about kinkeeping.
So this idea of kinkeeping, which has apparently been around for a while, but I hadn't heard of it. I hadn't heard it put that way until there was this article by Danielle Friedman in the New York Times. It was called "The Constant Work to Keep a Family Connected Has a Name." And she sort of unpacked the history of this term kinkeeping and what it meant. And it's one of those articles that 6 people sent to me and probably you as well, right?
Like, my sister-in-law, Christy, was like, you got to read this one. And I do think the reason why it has resonated so deeply, as these kind of viral articles sometimes do, is because it's saying something that we all have understood, but maybe didn't quite have the language for. And I feel like especially it reminded me of sometimes conversations that you've had about, like, just let it go, uptight mom. And that, in fact, a lot of the work that we are doing, we understand invisible labor. We understand, being the support and not getting enough credit for the things we do. But this second part of it, that this has a role in our families that is extraordinarily important, I thought was extremely validating.
Yes. So this dictionary.com made this their word of the day in April 2024. So it's having a moment, kinkeeping.
Kinkeeping is having a moment.
And as you said, it's like, I know what it is when I hear it explained, but kinkeeping, this is what dictionary.com says. It is the labor involved in maintaining and enhancing family ties, including organizing social occasions, remembering birthdays, sending gifts, etc. So it's the invisible workload, but it's sort of one part of it. It's things that knit your family together, and I sort of understand it to mean your family and your extended family, your in-laws, the cousins, right? The people, your larger family group, the work of making that group cohere.
Yes. I mean, she starts the article with a story about a train that is set up every year at Christmas time, and like a whimsical wonderland with a train running through it that always goes up at Christmas time. And the idea that becomes, sometimes people, after, what was the movie with the emotions, the animated movie, In and Out? Inside Out.
Inside Out.
Inside Out. In and Out was about Kevin Kline being a gay teacher. I'm talking about Inside Out.
The one with the emotions, where like Phyllis from The Office is the purple sad one. Yes, yes.
But there's an idea about core memories in that. And it's something that I hear, especially the generation kind of behind us. They're like, this is a core memory, when something great is happening. It's from that movie, I think. I mean, it's probably from the world. But the idea that the work of setting up the train and the Winter Wonderland and the snowscape, sure, you could also just put like one tree, from the Five and Dime up and call it a day, but that you're creating these core memories that have this very specific role in like bonding the family.
And bonding the family together. Right. So I tried to do like when did this start? When did the kinkeeping like words start? And it looks like the earliest one I could find that, again, Danielle Friedman, we're going to talk a lot about her article today because she did so much of this research and we're just sort of unpacking some of the things she highlighted. So she highlighted this. Marvin Sussman, a sociologist, 1955. We all love him here.
Not Marvin Sussman.
He highlighted the very interesting fact that we haven't said yet because it's so obvious as to go without saying, is that firstborn women and men, he said, but particularly women, he underlined, are more apt to be kinkeepers in their families. And he defines kinkeepers as people who are particularly knowledgeable about their kin and who keep vital and meaningful the interpersonal ties among them. And he thought it was very interesting. They tended to be females in the family.
Yes. And this is not exclusively female. Like, we definitely have a family historian in our family who is extremely into the genealogy of the family, has done a lot of trips, and keeps this incredible record of the family genealogy and but the vows have barely been said in the wedding, and boom, someone new pops up on the family tree. Like, that's a lot of work, and that is certainly like keeping the history of the family, and he's a dude.
That matters, but I think this is more the like, we have to have a family reunion, and who's going to book the place and who's going to bring the potato salad. That's kinkeeping,
correct,
right?
Correct.
And I'm interested in Ancestry.com. I say this as an Ancestry.com nerd.
Right.
I'm doing Ancestry.com. I find I'm way more interested in it than most of the family members. I try to excitedly show the ship manifest that brought the ancestor to Ellis Island. Nobody cares but me. It would be an act of love if anybody else cared. Besides,
people will care in the long term, Amy, and that's the whole annoying point of kinkeeping.
Who's going to bring grandma to the 8th grade graduation? Who's going to make sure she gets home and whatever? That's kinkeeping. That's work.
Yes. Shall I give you some examples of kinkeeping from the article?
Sure.
Creating or carrying on family traditions, right? This is the every night on Christmas Eve, we have crab soup. That's some offshoot of our family's tradition. The train set that gets built every year. We always go around. We used to growing up, we went around the night before. We had walkie-talkies because there was too many of us for one car. And we would go around and look at Christmas lights. And the lead car was Spirit of Christmas 1. And the car behind was Spirit of Christmas 2. When we'd be like talking to each other on the walkie-talkies about what we thought of the decorations. Buying gifts for birthdays and holidays. Yes.
Remembering that there is a birthday or a holiday.
Yeah, that's part one. Exactly.
And right now, I have a much overdue graduation card from my niece, that I bought, and then and it's my husband's sister's.
I was going to say,
daughter,
just to
but
check,
I'm a kinkeeper.
Is this your blood niece? No,
it's not my blood
your
niece.
Husband's niece.
And I'm happy to do it. I'm like, and he saw her. Like, did you give her the grad? Oh no, so I have the card, and it's the remembering that's still a spinning beach ball on my screen. That we have to get that graduation card out. I don't mind doing it. I'm not saying that, but it is kinkeeping. That's what it is.
How about coordinating medical care?
Yes.
Check. Performing emotional caregiving.
Okay, that seems huge and ill-defined, and yes.
And this one I like because it's a phrase that I've heard said about myself. Being the family glue. Like that kind of amorphous feeling that you're keeping people together. Important. Huge job. And kinkeeping.
My sister-in-law actually does a lot of this for my family. I mean, I certainly do a lot. I think the women in our family do a lot of it. But my sister-in-law, just this weekend, we were all in town for my nephew's baptism. Big Irish Catholic family. I believe I've mentioned that a few times. My 13th nephew was baptized, and we were all together. And everybody was coming to town.
Grandpa Billy Mack would say, y'all been begetting and begetting.
Begetting and begetting. And we all came into town, and the people who are hosting the baptism, my youngest brother and his wife, and they're busy. They have two under three, and they'll see you tomorrow at the baptism. Is like they're going minute to minute, right? And then meanwhile, all the rest of us had come in, and this one's staying over here, and this one's staying at a hotel, and this one's staying with my parents. And we all kind of like showed up at my brother and sister-in-law's because they have a nice backyard. And my sister-in-law around 4 p.m. was like, did anybody plan anything for tonight? And we're like, no, I mean, I'll do it. We're all just in town looking at each other. And she's like,
Right.
why don't I go shopping and we'll have a little cookout in my backyard? And of course, and we're all like, oh, okay, sure, if you don't mind, because she's the one who lives there. But she was the one who was like, I notice many out-of-town people sitting on my back porch looking at each other.
Would you like some food?
Would you like to have a family gathering tonight? And so even though she's an in-law, she took over that work because she's the one who lives in the town where everybody was staying. But she tends to do that work anyway, even when we're elsewhere.
Well, and I think that this is something, we just recently had a family wedding. It was the greatest. And I live near the site of the wedding. And so, my house became kind of like the staging place for some of the clothes. And we hosted a little luncheon for the bride. And then after the wedding, it was like, oh, everyone's scattering, but we were leaving the hotel. But before everybody actually got on planes, like, come to my house. We'll get bagels or whatever. And I have to say, I love that. I love it. I love my house being like the hub. I just find it fantastic. I love it. And I sometimes joke with my nieces and nephews who all live close by that when they call, I answer the phone, Abel's Car Rental and Storage. How can I help you? Because it's like, hey, can I borrow your car to go here? Or I'm getting a package and it'll get stolen for but I love it. Like it feeds my soul to have people in and out of the house, to be like, everyone's here. Let's get Chinese and I'll sit around. Like I love this part of being the kinkeeper. Like I find certain parts of it very onerous and certain parts of it my favorite part of being an adult.
Right. It's not always bad, but it is true, don't you think, that a family kind of only needs one, and once the kinkeeper has been established, and it's usually a female, and it's often like the daughter of the person who used to do this work, you become the kinkeeper, you become the one who does this stuff, and then it just becomes presumed you're going to keep doing this stuff. And then sometimes it's also presumed on top of this, like, oh, like, so we always have to go to her house, as if anybody else is ever saying, why don't you come to my house for a change? If the party's always at your house and people are like, oh, she always has to have the potato salad out or whatever. It's like people are free to do things differently, but they don't, because it's pretty nice to have a kinkeeper doing it for you.
Yes, although I think there's certainly big downsides, and we're going to discuss them because I have a list of them, to the kinkeeper role. But I also think that there's a tremendous gift opportunity if the kinkeeper role gets spread out, which I think some families do extremely well. Like the fundamental expectation of kinkeeping is, although I didn't have a word for it before I read this article, to me, when we've talked before about know what your family values are, I feel like this idea of kinkeeping I want it to be a very important family value in my home. Not mom does everything for everyone and makes everything magical, but the idea of kinkeeping as being a shared role for everybody in the family. And I have an example of that. So let's take a break and we'll talk about it. We'll come back. So I have this article that I love. I think I've probably referenced it before, by Frank Bruni in the New York Times. And it's called Tolstoy and Miss Daisy. We'll put a link in the show notes.
I feel like you referenced Frank Bruni, like where you go is not where you'll be. He's one of your guys.
Yeah,
you like a Frank Bruni.
I like his writing.
He used to be a theater critic, right? Or was he a food critic?
He was the theater critic. No, he was the food critic. His book is called Born Round, and it's about eating food. But he is now an op-ed writer for the New York Times. And he wrote this piece, and it really stuck with me. And it's about his 18-year-old niece. Basically, his dad drives north every from Florida every summer, right? Comes back up north. And there's no one to take the dad one year, and they're all trying to figure out their schedules. So his 18-year-old niece says she will go and be the driver on this trip. And then it's just a lovely article about, the idea that this new generation is like, someone needs to drive grandpa. And I'm going to read you this piece. They were proof, these two, 79-year-old man, 18-year-old granddaughter, that a family can pass its painstakingly nurtured closeness down through the generations, and that there comes a moment when the values impressed on the youngest members of the brood, the values imposed on them really, become the values they actually elect. And I do think that this lies at the heart of kinkeeping if we can shift from mom makes everything magical while dad and the boys eat dinner to like kinkeeping is kind of a shared role for all of us.
It's that painstakingly nurtured thing to quote Frank Bruni. It is hard work. And I think sometimes as work that women does tends to be poo-pooed as one, not that hard, or two, not that worthwhile.
Absolutely. And I want to, before we move on to the magic of kinkeeping, which I want to bring up early because I do think this is very important work. I believe in the importance of this work, but I reject the idea that it is one person's job. And I'm going to go so far as to say, I think when one person is too much the magical kinkeeper, it's harder to pass the traditions along because there's a little bit of like, I do everything. I keep in touch with it. No one else has to ever worry about this. I do it all. And then it's like people don't have real connections with each other because they're only connected through the person making all those connections.
Well, if you're the person who has the Christmas party for the cousins every single year, and then at some point you say, I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore, and nobody picks up the baton, then
right, it's over.
Then it's over, right? And then you do have a different relationship. Like in my family, it's really important to me, I think, and to my extended family too, that the cousins grow up knowing each other.
Correct.
And they do. And
we have a party every year called the Keep the Cousins Close party.
You do? We have a week called Cousins Week, and it's become like Cousins 3.5 days because it's too many people and kids are too old. But it really matters. So Carolyn Rosenthal, she is a sociologist who wrote about kinkeeping in the 80s, and she underlined it as primarily women's work, but she said that there is a goal to it, and she called it family solidarity and continuity. And it is true that when these traditions get dropped and don't get picked up, things do change and shift. When you don't have that person saying, "Oh, let's get together. We always make the ricotta cookies the second Sunday of December," or whatever. That even if you're rolling your eyes while you're doing it, something shifts when it isn't done anymore.
The friction around it is that sometimes I create a family calendar every year at the holidays, which is a picture of everybody in the family. I have a spreadsheet to make sure that everyone gets pictured equally. I have a checklist. But at every event, it becomes, that's going to be a calendar picture if we get a good picture. And I do tend to be the person being like, let's get together for a picture. And I do sometimes sense that like eye roll of like, with the pictures, always with the pictures. But I do it because I love to have the calendar. Like it hangs on my fridge and I look at it every, 10 million times a day. It's a beautiful set of pictures of everybody through the year. And then at dinner, we're like, oh my gosh, remember when we were in the RV, or remember the wedding, or remember the time you jumped off that huge dock and we didn't know if you could do it. Like, I love it. And I have found myself sometimes wanting to be like, don't roll your eyes at me. You get the calendar and you love it. And I should get more respect for making it. That friction does creep in. And I think that, I don't know what I think. I think that you have to understand which parts of it are working for you and are valuable to you and which parts of it are not.
So both sets of grandparents in our family have the digital picture frames that we've gotten them where you can upload pictures. And I'm definitely, there are multiple digital frame keepers in our family for sure, but it's important to me. It's something that I focus on. As you were saying this about the calendar, I see a picture and I email it to my mother-in-law's frame or my mother's frame. And see, I'm calling it my mother-in-law's frame and my mother's frame, even though they're both in homes where, where
There
the
is a male,
grandfathers live,
yes.
right? But the person who's keeping the frame, who's looking at it 100 times a day, who's texting me to say like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how little they were," whatever, is the female, and that solidarity and continuity. As you say, every time I look at my digital frame, it makes me smile, and every time Shutterfly sends me like, "This was you 16 years ago," I send it to my kids, and I'm sure they are less wowed by pictures of them when they were little than I am probably, but that, like, I do it because it's important to me, and even if sometimes they shrug at it or sometimes they roll their eyes at it, I think they like it, and I
It's
wanna do it. It isn't like,
important.
"How dare you not." It is important, right? I'm forwarding a Shutterfly picture, who cares? But it is
It's
important, it matters.
important. That I think, for me, was kind of the revelation of this article and the discussion, is that you push through the work of doing it, and then the invisibleness of it kind of stinks, but in the long run, it is the fabric of your lives in this very deep way. Whether or not people roll their eyes when I take their picture, we have a record of our lives that I have spent a lot of time helping to create, and that means something, whether or not it means something today. Like, I just find the revelation that this work is useful, so validating in and of itself, like, full stop.
Yeah. There's a study, Caitlin Allen, she's a social and behavioral scientist, and she studied, kinkeeping in terms of medical outcomes. So she specifically studied, families with a history of breast cancer in the family, where there was a kinkeeper in the family, always female in this case, who was on top of the other women in their family to get their mammograms as preventative care. And it did in this study tend to be the kind of person who's sending you the Shutterfly picture and picking a weekend for the clam bake, right? It's that same person who's also like, it's time for your mammogram and sending that reminder around and driving somebody. So that in families that have this structure, this social support among members of the family, there are actually better healthcare outcomes because the members of that family feel like members of a family unit and participate in behaviors that strengthen the family unit. A kinkeeper makes a family unit stronger.
Absolutely, and I think that this kinkeeping, there's usually a driving force, but I think it is best when that driving force is, like, helping to direct the troops, you know? I think about, I had a family member who was extremely, extremely ill, and it was during COVID, and a lot of worry and anxiety and terror about what was going on, and we didn't really understand what was going on. And even just like the family group text, and then it turns out that somebody knows a pulmonologist, and so their hospital is overwhelmed, and we're sending pictures of the machines to a pulmonologist in Nashville who's relaying the information back to Texas. Like, the connections, those fibrous connections that you help to make within a family, they make a difference when you need them. But those connections are made sitting around chatting at the beach vacation that you put together. They're
Mm.
made while you make the roast for the holiday meal. And those connections are very practical at a certain point, because you really can, like, turn to each other and help each other out, but they're made in in smaller moments, I think. And I think it's interesting because on one branch of my family, the connecting parent has died. So my husband's father has died. And so it really is interesting to feel what it's like for our own generation to stay together. Because there is no generally, I mean, I'm just leaving the age where like this was mom's work. My own mother's passed away. Like I am starting to feel that changeover of, oh, if we want to see each other, it's up to us to figure that out. It's up to us to create traditions together because there is no kind of like omniscient kinkeeper above me anymore. Like I am
Yeah.
now in that role and it's super notable to me. And I have to say, there's a lot about it I really like. We're doing things our own way and we're carving these new roads together. I know some people who have divorced or their spouses have passed away and are getting remarried. And one of the things they often talk about is finding a new like vacation spot or something where they can create new memories in a new spot. So it's not just like, oh, we're in your house and you have to show us how to make the bread, or we're in my house and we'll show you like how the dog likes to play. They go to a third spot and it's like, okay, this is now our place where we're
Mhm.
making new memories. And I think that is really insightful.
Yeah. That sounds right to me. I feel like that's even true for my family of 5, that we engage differently when we're all somewhere new together.
Yes.
If we're home, then everybody's just in their rooms or, doing their own thing in the same space. But when we're
Yeah. And I
somewhere
think
new, we experience somewhere new.
and I think it's a good, because I think we're talking about our two families where we come from a tradition that had a lot of good kinkeeping.
Mhm.
And there are people probably listening who did not have as great an experience with the traditions of kinkeeping. And what I think is interesting about it, there's two sides to it. One is the side of like, why are the women always working while the men watched football and then come to the table? Annoying.
Mhm.
But also, like, what the work you do to like craft the tapestry of the people you love's lives is the number one thing that will kind of define how they remember their lives. It's the most important work in the world. It's not, it feels to me much more alive and less frustrating than the like, I do all the dishes and nobody notices.
It's not that, and it's not like soccer, permission slip. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
As you're saying, it's changing that thing. It makes me think of, uh, one of my kids was recommended some meditation. We should all be meditating, right?
Sure.
One of my kids was told, "Hey,
Did
you
a
should
little
really start a
today.
meditation practice." Well, meditation makes me feel more anxious instead of less, and that's common apparently when you begin meditation. But as this professional explained to me as well, this was interesting. It's like you need to get past that. You need to meditate every day. This is what I haven't done this, you guys. I probably should. You need to meditate,
Teacher, heal thyself,
she was saying,
to mix a
for
metaphor.
30 to 60 days. Just like any like atomic habit, right? You need to do it for 30 to 60 days before it really starts to kick in. Before that, it's going to feel hard. It's going to be weird. But then the practice is there for you. And then when you really need to find stillness to return to calm, you can just drop that plumb line and it's there for you because you've done the work. And I thought about
That's
that before when you were talking about like the fibrous connections of a family. That's what you're doing when you're gabbing on the beach, like you do every summer, right? Then you're there when somebody has a heart attack. That those connections have been created.
that's the famous line about meditation that someone asks. I think it's the Dalai Lama. I may be wrong about that. How often should people meditate? And he says, whatever, 20 minutes a day. And they say, but what about people who are too busy to meditate for 20 minutes a day? And he says, oh, yes, they should meditate for 40 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And it's like the practice it is the goal. Danielle Friedman talks about family members who think this work is unnecessary. Do the cupcakes really need to be homemade? And it's like, yes, they do need to be homemade because it's kinkeeping. They don't always need to be homemade. Like soccer, you're the soccer mom on a Tuesday and you're having a bad week, go stop by the store. But I make every holiday the same 3 cookies in my kitchen with the same rolling pin that I got from my mom who made those cookies with me when I was little. And my kids will go on to be like, the smell of gingerbread and like the time that mom spent making this magic with us. It's the most valuable thing
Yeah.
in the world.
Yeah. We
Not
have some ideas.
gingerbread cookies, the fabrics that you're building.
So we have some ideas about how to get maybe other family members more on board with you if you are the kinkeeper, or how to underline why kinkeeping is valuable. And so we'll talk about that after this. So Eve Rodsky wrote Fair Play. We've had her on the show. We should link to that interview as well, as we often do. And her advice about when you are the kinkeeper is that you she says, spend 5 minutes on the why. Because if you didn't grow up making cupcakes, making homemade cupcakes for everybody's birthday, and your parenting partner is in the kitchen completely frazzled because they don't have time to make the homemade cupcakes, and then you say, well, why don't we just not do it? And they're like, because it's a tradition and we have to do it. If you're on the outside of it, then that why do the cupcakes have to be homemade might not be as caustic as it seems, right? Maybe they think they're supporting you by telling you, relax, traditions don't matter. But of course they do matter to you. So if you spend a couple of minutes on this, here's why this is incredibly important to me. My Nana always made me cupcakes on my birthday, and I want my kids to have that experience because of course they never met her, but I want them to feel that personal, you're so important, that I always felt, that it helps them get on board with you. Because I think if we agree this work is important, which I do, then I think we need to figure out how you gently but nicely push back on the poo-pooing of it. Like, oh, here she goes, dragging all the trains again under the Christmas tree. Like, right, because it's all these grandchildren will remember. And we all love it. And so I'm going to do it. And I'm not going to have you tell me that it's not important after I spend 8 hours on it, because it's important to me.
And I do think that this is work that your partner can really help with. And it's a discussion that I've had with my partner. And I will say he has gotten much better about it. I always remember before we ate every meal growing up that my dad would stop before we ate and give like a toast to my mom and say, this is amazing food that she's cooked. What a beautiful day we've had because of all her shopping and work, and acknowledging that these things don't happen magically is very important. And I also think that passing along those traditions and making your kids have leadership roles in those positions. And as we always did, I'm going to talk about something a little sensitive. So if you want to put your earphones on or move little believers out of the room, this is the time to do that. We always did an Easter egg hunt and the bunny would come. We own a bunny suit. And as my teenager got like, this is too dumb for me to participate in, we were like, you're in the suit. If you're not hunting, you're in the suit. And last year he was the Easter bunny and he loved it. And I was just having a conversation with my son about an upcoming event for somebody else in the family. And he had an excellent idea for a gift for this person. And he was so lit up by the idea that like this gift was so perfect and this person was going to be so surprised and it was going to be so amazing. And I said, you're moving into one of the funnest parts of holidays and birthdays. You're creating the magic now. You're not just sitting there and receiving it. And he was like he really got the idea of, oh, that's exciting.
That might be the best strategy for those of us who aren't kinkeepers and don't necessarily get buy-in from other people. Rather than getting angry or resentful, we explain the why and we figure out a way to get them involved. Not that we're doing anything wrong, but you see what I'm saying? Like, don't be annoyed that everybody thinks this thing is stupid. You figure out a way, like, well, we're doing it. And sooner or later, they sit up and do it. Because some of it's not so exciting, right? Some of it is making magic once a year for children, and some of it is taking Aunt Thelma to see Aunt Bessie, because otherwise nobody's they're not going to see each other, right? And you're the one who has to drive them back and forth across town every week. Like that's maybe a little bit less magical for you too, but you're doing
That's
it.
right. It's not all just amazing and fun, but I do think looping people in, and some people are never going to do this. So like don't bang your head against the wrong door, but there are ways in which this work, I think, can suit people's needs. One of the things I was just talking to my child who loves music, and we like to listen to music in the car. And I said, I'm really burned out on music. So one thing I want to do is do a family playlist. Like some people might get really into that, you know? That's a way to stay connected. Like, let's all add to this playlist. Not for nothing. I'm a Facebook fan when it comes to this, or a social media person. I'm an oldie, so I like Facebook, but I do get to see like, oh, they had a baby. Oh no, this person's struggling. Like, I do think sometimes social media and text chains and things like that do make it easier to stay connected. I mean, we started a family Zoom on Sunday nights during the pandemic that we still do. And there are Sundays where, oh, we're in the car, everyone's traveling, no one's around. Forget it. There are times where it's 2 people. There are times when it's 14 people. And I think it is what's hard about this work is it's not one cupcake. It's not one train set. It is,
Mm.
there's a quote from Annie Dillard that I love, and it's just so simple. It's how we spend our days is in fact how we spend our lives. And it's like, right, this is it the daily work of kinkeeping that leads to like a connected family with a lot of good core memories. And I just want to reiterate that I do think this is work you can start at any time. You may not have come from a tradition of like homemade cupcakes and magical trains under the tree at the holidays. You may have come from a religious tradition that was more damaging to you than positive to you. And you can start this today. You can restart kinkeeping. You can start it with a friendship circle, you know? You can start it you can have fallen away. My roommates from college and I did a yearly trip for years and years, and then we got busy and we had kids and we couldn't do it, and, like, I think we'll probably pick it up again at some point,
Mhm.
but things fall away and things come back, and we talk a lot about the holiday attrition, like, you don't have to make cream white onions because great grandma Myrtle used to make them. You don't have to keep up with every tradition, but you are sewing this tapestry and you can get other people to lend a hand with it because the tapestry is so valuable. And I would argue it's more valuable the more people who contribute to it.
It's so valuable, this work, right? You're creating the village that we all bemoan the loss of. This is village building. And so don't let anybody tell you that it's dumb or for ladies or, beneath their concern or why do we always have to do it? Because we do, because this really matters.
Yeah, it's so much more important than the SAT scores and the
Mm.
anything else. It's so much more important. It is like the fabric of our lives. I'm going to go back to the Frank Bruni article one
Oh,
more time
yeah.
because the article is basically about like the magic of this 18-year-old young woman deciding to drive her 80-year-old grandfather is the end of this kin-keeping work where the family has a sense of responsibility to each other. He says, "Our family methodically infused our get-togethers with a sense of occasion, an even more profound sense of gratitude, advertising and even amplifying their feelings about family as a way of bequeathing them. They wanted the compact that they'd established, the covenant that they'd built to endure." And I do think that it comes from you can give voice to it. Like, isn't it great that we're all together? Look at how much work mom did to make sure this day would be special for everyone. Isn't it wonderful that, this wedding that we just had, that everybody played a role, mom of the bride did this, aunts of the brides did that, brothers of the bride did this, like, and together as a family, this marriage is now about a new dawn of a new set of kinkeeping. And that's what's exciting about this marriage. And I think that you can really underline that work. And fundamentally, I just think that we should all be really proud of ourselves because this is very important work that we're doing.
Hug a kinkeeper today. I'm going to
Hug a kinkeeper.
I'm going to reach out to my sister-in-law and say, thank you for always being the, I said it, but I'm going to say it again. Thank you for always being the, am I hosting everybody here tonight? Looks like we are. You're welcome. You're always welcome here. Thank you for being that person.
And I would also say, look for the places where you find joy in being a kinkeeper and look for any places where you might find resentment or any lack of joy in being a kinkeeper. And now that we know this term and what this work is, I think we can also sometimes say, all right, it's kind of drudgery driving around town and finding the presents for everybody, but I do it in service of kinkeeping, and that's important to me. Or this is drudgery, it's invisible, and everyone seems to be rolling their eyes about it, and I'm going to stop doing it because it's not working for whatever reason, this piece of kinkeeping that I'm doing. Or everyone hates it but me, but I smile every time I look at the calendar, so I'm going to keep doing it. And I don't care that everyone's mad at me that I'm always taking pictures.
You do you. Well said. Well said. This took me to some unexpected places, this episode.
We really have to shout out Danielle Friedman, whose article, The Constant Work to Keep a Family Connected, has a name in the New York Times, which this article just like lit us up and made us really want to talk about this. And we cited a lot of her work and her research in this article. So there'll be a link to it. Please go read her original article that we are citing today.
Thanks so much for listening and being part of our community.
You are our kid friends, and we will talk to you next time.
Next week. So long.